Hello, my name is Colin Goldberg, and welcome to the Techspressionist Salon. This is Salon number 51, and the topic tonight is AI engines, friend or foe. And this is a topic that was proposed by Renata Janiszewska, who is going to be our moderator for this session. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Renata.
Thank you, Colin. Hello, everybody. This is a topic that has a lot of controversy swirling around it. The one thing that I wanted to make clear was when I said friend or foe, the word foe is not necessarily a negative word. It's formidable adversary might be a good substitute for that, or even a worthy opponent is another word that would fit. I've seen that we have music AIs, text AIs, and now we have, we've had for a while text image AIs, and we're going to be talking about those with 8 artists who are going to give us a short presentation. And I'll be reminding you at the 5-minute mark. So without any more delay, I would like to introduce the first artist presenting, Cynthia Di Donato.
Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'll start sharing my screen. Okay. Let's see. Can you all see my screen?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes. Great. Okay, I'll get started. Obviously, you see the topic here, and I'm going to move right on. Bear with me, I have a couple of text things to read, but I think they're important. We always are thinking about what art is, and there's no universal definition. But the general consensus is, particularly with the visuals, that art is a conscious creation of something beautiful or meaningful using skill and imagination. But now we have another feature that's entered into the art world. And I'll put quotes around that depending on how you feel about it. There are art engines and apps, and as you can see here, there are 4 that I've listed. These are the 4 that I've played around with. And for those who are here and don't know what AI art refers to, it's art generated with the assistance of artificial intelligence that uses either text prompts and or images to generate art. On the pro side, I did a little research and I read an article by Ralph Millier. AI art is challenging the boundaries of curation. He mentions in particular that AI art is a multifaceted notion of curation, and it continues to blur the line between curation and creation. He goes on to say photographers and AI artists have had to deal with an abundance of digital objects whose curation is part and parcel of the artistic process. He says also that the artist's intention and artist's sensibility may be expressed in the very act of promoting specific outputs to the status of artworks. He also says it's more akin to a new kind of creative skill. AI researchers even talk about prompt engineering to describe the process of crafting good prompts to obtain desired results. On the con side, I read an article in Wired by Scott. Oh no, it's not Wired. The other fellow was Wired. Chambers. The article is in Towards Data Science, that particular website, and he feels that AI agents are not artists. And he goes on to say, artificial art lacks its own intrinsic psychic meaning to the agent. AI agents are not creating art, rather they are replicating art. For example, he says the CAN agents, which are creative adversarial networks, which he uses interchangeably with GANs, which are generative adversarial networks, were trained on tens of thousands of original artworks created by humans. He goes on to say it is not drawing upon its personal or collective experiences, neither conscious or unconscious. He concedes that upon inspection, many generated images are artistic and aesthetic, and the research is fascinating. But he questions, are cans creating art? I will now go on to show you what I have done with AI engines. First is Night Cafe. And as you can see here on the left, I have an original image that I started with, which is one of my water media paintings that I abandoned. I put it into Night Cafe and used the prompt shapes at sea, and this is what I got. Then I went over to Motion Leap, which is a app that does everything from animate to filters, provides filters. And so I animated that piece. Again, I visited Night Cafe, and this time I only used a text prompt, Psychedelic City, Times Square. I continued to evolve it in the image to the right with the same prompt. Then I changed the prompt of that image you saw in the last slide to 1880s, misty London street, and I chose the post-apocalyptic Wonderland creation method. After I finished, I went into iColorama, which is another app I use quite frequently, and I blurred the whole thing. And then I added a textured layer in the end to bring me finally to this piece. There are apps for the iPhone and iPad. One is Neural Paint, the other is Wombo. I've tried both. This one from Wombo, I just put in buildings for the text prompt, and I used it as a background in a piece that I created with a layer that I worked on in Procreate. And this, of course, is all my own work put on top of this image. And I made the image at the beginning of the war in Ukraine. Then I went to Midjourney, and I went to use text for this. Whoop, let me go back, I'm in the wrong place. I put swirling galaxy in its black hole, and this is what I achieved. And then again, I took it into Procreate and I manipulated it, and I was looking for titles. Keep doing that to myself. I was looking for titles, and Tommy Mintz and Colin came up with the two that are listed below. Thank you. Again, in Midjourney, I put the text crescent, which is the first image, and I got a lot of images with crescent, but I decided on this one. I decided then to go look for some of my art that I started and was not happy with. So this original painting in the middle, I took into, sorry, I keep doing that.
You've got 1 minute left, please.
I took it into digital manipulation, and then in the end, I came up with a final work where I blended the manipulated original art with the AI from Midjourney. I consider AI a friend. It can be used as a tool in the artistic process, much as a traditional collagist or a digital collagist may incorporate pieces that are created by others to create something new. For me, AI generations alone do not have enough of the artist's personal experiences and or hand present in its making. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Our next speaker is David Cohen, otherwise known as Doodle Slice.
Hi, everybody. Just pardon me a moment while I bring up the share here. So. Hopefully, can you see AI engines, friend or foe?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Because I can't see it on my screen. The process here for me began with just a lot of play, which I think as an artist going back 30 some odd years, I've always been interested in letting the paint drip, letting, the smudge happen, not try to hide the signs of human in the work. So weirdly with AI, I think despite the fact that there's no human on the other side of the fence, I feel comfortable with the idea of these accidents. And that's, I guess, how I kind of look at it. I give it some words and it gives me happy accidents back. And, but it's like eating at a buffet, because there's nothing to keep you from coming back with your plate for more and more. And I'm sure all of you who've played with it have, had one of those times where you're just like, well, let me just see one more generation, one more randomize. Let's see what happens next. So I end up with this glut and folder full of images. So in an effort to kind of steer myself, I turned to some of my poetry. And so I had written this poem about a squirrel and an encounter with a squirrel. And I said, let me see what the AI can bring me as an image. So what you see on the left is, I was using Wombo Dream. I've used all of the ones Cynthia mentioned, and as well as Disco Diffusion. And they all have their pros and cons. Dream seems, at least at this stage, to produce more murky images. It's harder to pull out something with a lot of crisp detail, but I don't mind that, because I was really looking at it more for direction and inspiration. And so bringing that into my iPad, I began adding line and bringing out the character of the squirrel, putting it more in the cartoon style that if you've seen other of my work, it kind of fits in, to kind of create a mood that fit the poem. And continuing in that vein, this is another poem. So again, on the left is what, after several iterations, I decided I liked the AI had given me. And basically the prompts, in this case, this was Dolly. I asked for a watercolor image. I had asked for it to be figures in silhouette, but it didn't seem to understand that concept. And Dancing in a Field of Clover, which in the body of the poem is a refrain about meeting in the clover and will you dance with me tonight. And so it had a little bit of the playful, innocent feel that I wanted, but I wanted to take it a little darker, bring that silhouette in, bring a moon in. So basically building on top of that gave me a nice foundation to add some more painterly elements as well as some linear work. And again, I feel that it complements the poem very well. So it was nice to have that, guardrail, if you will, on the selection process.
David, you have 1 minute left, please.
Okay, speeding up. The next piece here is more of a collage piece. So I took several of my harvesting of these images and wanted to bring them together with some hand-drawn elements, this time with just a theme in mind. Mindful at Magnolia is the name of the piece, and use the combinations and trimming them, the magnolias out of the one image and bringing them into the collage, but doing the rest with handwork. And now I'm exploring a little bit more of what I consider a true collaboration with the AI. And I've written some haiku: sing sweet mountain bird, fall silent with due respect, breaks the day, resume. And I just gave that haiku entire as a prompt. And this was one of several images that it generated. And I still played curator to bring out some more. Sing for thistle seeds, wine sap hues, warm burgundy, mellow industry. Vigilance, brown thorn, stand sharp, brittle protector, guard the withered rose. And I'm very interested in this dynamic of playing back and forth. So like Cynthia, I'm concluding friend or foe, friend. There's lots to play with here. And I look forward to exploring more. You know, the pitfalls are time being sucked away and spending money on credits, but so it goes. But I appreciate your time and letting me share.
Thank you very much, David. Our next presenter is Diane.
Okay, just wanted to first say thank you. Let me start by saying that I'm not a techie. I don't know what an algorithm is or how they work, so I'm just going to talk about my limited experience with two of the programs and whether I believe they're friends or foes. So let me get my screen sharing here. Okay, can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
All right, great. Okay, so I was first introduced to Midjourney by my friend and fellow Techspressionist, Frederick Pons. And since a lot of my digital work revolves around visions of the future, I started by using prompts like alien planet with futuristic city. Then I took these source images and augmented them in Photoshop. And some of the images coincided with what I expected to see. And others reminded me a lot of the old Omni magazine, the science fiction art. And then one night while I was showing somebody how that text to image worked, I just put in Siberian tiger wearing a space helmet. And then my little Cats for Peace series was born. I've been using that hashtag for a while, and Midjourney helped me quickly create several images that I was able to print out. I made a little certificate with some text on how these cats were really cool. And I sold quite a few of them at the last local art show. So my funny little cat seemed to really find an audience. And then I took a page out of Colin's book and I entered my last name. And then after I fixed some facial aberrations, because there's always a few, the result was quite good and fit in nicely with the research I'm conducting into my family's immigration journey. So using photos of my parents, I'm able to, tweak the AI's result and extrapolate what my grandparents look like when they first arrived on Ellis Island, and I can now build my family tree. So then I got the invite for Dolly, and I found that it much more, I felt, drew from photographs than Midjourney. And this is an image when I put in my last name, Marsella, and it pulled up the city of Marsella, Colombia, which is not really what I wanted. So I tried to augment it by adding the word teenage girl. And then it said that I violated their standards and they was going to block me if I didn't stop. So I think I'm hoping they'll fix that. So since I find that each generator seems to interpret differently, I created side-by-side comparison of the two programs. And you can see I got two very different images when I put in young, pretty Italian woman circa 1910 wearing peasant clothes. I'm pretty happy with what Midjourney thinks we look like, but Dolly, I'm not sure why I got a troll, but I'm hoping they'll fix that. But I did get my family and I got a very good laugh out of it. Now, since these programs are drawing on someone's images from somewhere, copyright infringement is a real danger, because you can add in the style of, you can create your own Thomas Kincaid painting if you wanted so, print it out and, sell it. And I see that a lot at local art shows. But copyright infringement is not new. It's as old as the Romans copying the Greek statues and architecture. And I don't think it's going away anytime soon. But these AI engines are really increasing the risk of artists losing revenue by having their images scraped off the internet. But I think artists will just need to adapt, or maybe it's time to go into copyright law. But I feel these generators are really good tools or resources in the creation of art. So what I did here was I put in one of my paintings, and then I put the description into DALL-E and see how close I could get. Now, if I didn't have a live model to work from, the image on the right, it gives me pretty good lighting and composition, and the anatomy is pretty right on. So I think it's a good source. It's a good source. I think we can work from them. And likewise in this one, there's a painting of mine on the left, and then a Midjourney and a DALL-E of similar prompts. And I think if we use these images as tools and studies, I think we can definitely consider them friends. Now, Oxford Dictionary defines art as the expression of human skill and imagination. But what this definition doesn't specify is by what means this expression would take, or with what tools would be used to create it. If viewed as a means to an end, or the next generation of tools artists have at their disposal, I believe that AI can be a friend. And then finally, I wanted to see how the AI saw itself in human form. So I simply put in the prompt AI in human form, and I got these two images. So the future is here, and it is female. Thanks so much for listening to my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
I was really touched by how you investigated or looked into your ancestry.
It's something that we're kind of lost on, because there's nobody left to tell me, so I have to build it. But thank you.
The next presenter is Colin Goldberg.
Hey, can you guys see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I thought I would do a little demo. I was just really sort of experimenting, with AI stuff with Midjourney, and honestly haven't gotten too deep into it, but I thought it might be interesting to do a little bit of an experiment. So as the salon was going, I just put in Techspressionist salon to see what it would come up with. But I'd like to get some words, some prompt ideas from the audience, so we could sort of do a live exquisite corpse. Maybe if you want to just unmute if anyone has a word they'd like to suggest.
Flying carpet.
Flying carpet. All right. Anyone else?
Turtle dreams.
Turtle dreams. Okay. Let's try those two. So I'm in Midjourney right now within Discord, and I'm going to say flying carpet. Turtle dreams. And it's going to start rendering. And what it does is it gives 4 different options. And then you can choose if you want to upscale any of the 4 or create variations on any of the 4. So this is just going to show people who aren't familiar, with how this works, sort of what the process is. And while it's rendering, I'll show you my first initial experiments. I just put in, my first prompt was Techspressionism cat, ended up with this guy. And then one of my friends from college, from undergrad, saw the post of that, and he said, can you do Techspressionist woman in a wine glass and Techspressionist emu versus warthog, which were 2 strange drawings I did when I was in college that he actually has. So I created AI versions of that. And then the next one I did was I put in my name, Colin Goldberg. This apparently is what the AI thinks I look like. And then this one was Jackson Pollock using a computer. And these are, very basic prompts. A lot of people who are sort of more into this specify all sorts of things like aspect ratio or different kinds of rendering engines. This is just what it came up with when I put in Techspressionism. and then Techspressionist. So I think sometimes, it's interesting to see what single words might come up with, but you could see here, so this is what the output was for our experiment, Flying Carpet, Turtle Dreams, and then you can pick one of these for Midjourney to then create variations on. So if I select V4, it'll start working on creating variations of the fourth one. And again, for me, this is sort of more of satisfaction of curiosity. I don't know that I would necessarily, I mean, it is definitely addictive to start doing this, just to find out what happens essentially. But I can't foresee it becoming incorporated into my own studio practice too deeply. It's just not, it's more of a novelty for me than anything else. But I do think it is very interesting, and that's just me personally as an artist. I think there's plenty of valid usages for it. And I did, take notice of Ann Spalter's recent collection of AI spaceships, which I thought was a very well executed drop, and the results were pretty interesting. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to share with regards to this topic.
Thank you very much, Colin. Upscaling sometimes makes it look a little bit more finished or rounded out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I should have actually shown. So when you upscale, it'll give you just that one image and not the 4 quadrants, and it'll take it and enlarge it. But I've definitely seen people put in prompts like 16:9 to do like a certain aspect ratio, or Unreal Engine. I don't know if it actually uses specific rendering engines if you ask it to, but there's all sorts of different very specific prompts that I guess people use to control the output. I would say I'm at the hobbyist level. So
Thanks a lot. Now, Patrick Lichty has been doing a lot of different work with Midjourney, and let's take it away, Patrick.
Yeah, let's see here. Well, not just Midjourney. I've been working in generative and algorithmic art and that sort of thing since the mid-90s. And so I'm, not going to talk about anything like fractals or Kai's power tools or anything like that from the 90s, because that's just going on too long. But I've been very interested in algorithmic, expansions of work. This is a piece I called Predator versus Predator, and kind of dealing with the idea of robotic drawing, robotic mark making, and that sort of thing. And the idea that most of our machines and most of our pets are all from some sort of martial lineage. But about 2018, I have an iPad, and one thing I'm very interested in is like mind is generator and machine is generator. And a lot of this has to do with my fascination with automatism coming from the Dadas and Surrealists. And my background is Japanese is my second language, and calligraphy training and that. And so what I did is I just started cranking through 3 or 4 calligraphies every day in a very gestural sense. And I saw that Ann Spalter and Carl Aganis were doing a lot of work in Playform. So I knew of Mr. Alganal's work in generative engines. So I gave him a call, and I became one of the Playform people. And so I had about like 3,000-4,000 of these pieces that I'd done. And I fed them into the engine and started coming up with these other pieces. In other words, trying to see whether I could find areas of commonality in my stuff, and started running generations of work, animating them, and also done a lot of with Nagin, a lot of Persian carpets. But going from this basically led me to my collaborations with Negin and Colin, basically having to do with they have a sketch completion piece, kind of like that one of that the guy who does complete children's drawings as if they're paintings. And so Playform has something like that, and I was doing these sketches and ascribing a style to them and layering them, and brought these to Colin's work. And then also Negin and I did some textile work for a show in Iran. And so this was my piece in conversation with my dear Negin. And so what this led to was taking these layerings of sketch completions with with some of the calligraphic stuff in the middle, and it's kind of like that. Maybe more layers than this, but that's your basic minimum. This led to something that's now in the Techspressionist NFT collection. I kept expanding on this work. And so that's basically one of my few NFTs from these series. But the thing is I'm always thinking about how this can be expanded into motion and gesture. But at that point, I really kind of started seeing the other engines like Night Cafe, and this was in the Techspressionist show at Southampton. And this was a poem that I did for Negin in our early days of our relationship. And so I fed that in there.
Over the mountain.
And of course, it's very lovely. It's very luminous and representative of it. But on one hand,
lands on her.
I find that Night Cafe in many ways also did a number of animations based on photography that we did from 3D scans in a show we did in Cyprus over last December. I kind of felt that a lot of Night Cafe's use for me was a little narrow. So one thing I've been interested in is using prompt-based engines as a kind of form of writing and poesis. In other words, to me, it's kind of like not necessarily art, but maybe concrete prose, because I'm very interested in concretism. So I've done Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney. I'm kind of interested in maybe doing Disco Diffusion, because I've seen some interesting work that was over at that was highlighted by friends of mine who run a gallery in New York called Postmasters, and I thought that was kind of interesting. So I was kind of looking at this idea of self-referential work, kind of like computers dreaming of computers, or if we're talking about Techspressionism, in other words, like the idea of what is the notion of the computer inside something that's talking about digital art. So I was looking around for some things, and these are a couple of studies that I did, but I started finding something that was very much in the expressionist range. And what I wound up with was this really tight set of prompts, and really just tweaking little bits like color or size. And Colin was saying 16:9, probably looking for mine. I almost always do my work in 16:9. And so to me, I really don't look at this as art, but the idea of concretizing some intent. So I'm looking at this idea of maybe, intent is medium. So, and every once in a while, going from series, I've done 4 series of these with format and for different types of fabrication, different types of execution. And, I'll just throw out a prompt and rewrite. And so this led me to series 3. This is not the format that I was doing. I was doing, 48 by 12, 4:1. And I'm actually thinking of getting one of those shot out at Walgreens just to see what it looks like as a 2x8, that we did at the Rid Media show. So the thing is that, just really working with the words, just little bits. I think this idea of playing with intention and that sort of thing as kind of part of the medium. The other thing I thought was really interesting is that the output really changed a lot when I went to different formats. So this is the 8x6 format that I wanted to use for some of my larger output, like weavings and that I think this would really go well with. And so I'm really fascinated with how when you change the format, how things change so much. And then saying, whoa, wait a second, this is completely out of control. And then you turn around and say, okay, guess what? How do we wrestle this back into position? And this is what I've been doing with this. Iterate, adjust, iterate, adjust. And that's kind of the thing there is that I've always been kind of a process-based artist, is basically looking at different frameworks and different brackets to work with, and kind of then funneling my intention through those. And I think this is what I'm doing with this, is that in many ways, it reminds me of a whole lot of different disruptive technologies like desktop publishing, basically really disrupted, my work in graphic design. But, basically I found that, there was a core practice that still stayed there. And I think that's the one thing that, really doesn't shake me up too much with this, because I find that after a while, there's a style that the engine maintains that people kind of recognize and say, oh, that's from Stable Diffusion, that's from Midjourney, that's from this. And I think what I've been trying to do, if you can kind of see, I've been trying to do things that sort of break the engine's expectations. And I'll kind of say this in that, yeah, and then I'll just say some of the work that I've been doing as well, for a friend of mine, Nathan Schaefer, who's in Canada, basically kind of like a climate fiction, dirigible stories in the 22nd century. I've been kind of exploring things with that, dealing with steampunk, cyberpunk, and biomorphic shapes. And so that led me to one of my favorite pieces so far in that route. And I'm just going to put it out as a provocation. And this is what I call the cybernetic cat tank, which people tend to like. And so in other words, I like the idea of it. If we're going to have cybernetic robots going across the landscape, I definitely would like to have them be biomorphic cat tanks. And that's the thing.
Thanks.
So anyway, it's like, so I'm glad that to present the work with my own exploration of this, and with my dear Nagin and with Colin. So thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I was chatting with Patrick this week, and one of the things I've noticed about for example, Midjourney has a default to teal and orange very frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to give it a lot of guidance when it comes to color. And I find with DALL-E, then the colors are lighter, brighter, cleaner, but their resolution is poor. And there's a lot of stuff going on that I think it's just, the question you asked me was, what is it we are trying to accomplish as artists?
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that we can contemplate.
And that's with intent, shaping intent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So is Susan here?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. All right, you're our next presenter, Susan.
So there's a screen share still happening, and I can't. Patrick's screen share is still there. Okay, thanks. Okay. My experimentation, I approached AI as an experimental tool. And I came to it with thinking of what can I make this do and how can I use it in my art? So I initially fed in some prompts and just I played with it. I was using Wombo. It's the only application I've used on my iPad. And I decided to think about it as a way to possibly expand the series that I've been doing since 2016 about self-portraiture related to aging. So I fed in prompts such as, where are my prompt ideas? Older woman who loves birds. And this is, and I did it multiple times until I found something that I liked. And then in this case, I lightened it up a bit and then started applying it with a self-portrait. So these are some of the pieces that I created. And then I worked it some in Snapseed, I think this particular one. And I believe this is the last, this is my final piece. So another time I prompted, I think it was something like older woman as an animal. And I really liked this image and I played with it quite a bit to superimpose my own image into the animal. And I felt like as though my goal was to meld an even more animalistic way, like my face to become more of the animal and then create another, and then the result would be a persona or a animal human form. So I created a number of these. Oh, that's my picture. I don't want that. But and I'd forgotten about one other that I just remembered this morning as people were talking, that this was another prompt that had to do with aging. And this is where I ended up with it. I don't have memory of where all the in-between pieces are. But basically, my goal, I do think of it as, I think of it as a tool, another way for me to create art that is part of a bigger plan of the bigger project. And I've used, I was using Diana as a blending tool. And in this one that I'm showing right now, I also use Procreate. I think it has a lot of potential, actually. I'm using, as you can see, black and white photos of myself. And where am I? Let me get back into the Zoom. I'll stop sharing. That's my experience. Oops, okay. That's my experimentation. And if I were to say what I'm going to do is continue experimenting, I think of it as a tool. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Susan. Up next is Monsieur Price.
All right, Renata, thank you. Wow. So I've kind of indicated in several previous salons that I've been really thinking about the text image AI for me as a tool to help me come up with some sense of a new type of visual language. And so at this point in time, I'm squarely in the camp of AI as foe. I don't see that as a negative, as you said, Renata, but I see it as a worthy adversary that I need to, most of the last 6 months I've been experimenting. I haven't tried creating any final imagery yet, as opposed to a number of the artists here today. And I really feel that there's a lot that we don't know. The opacity of these engines, to me, is a double-edged sword. And for me, I feel unsettled using somebody else's technology that I don't get a chance to really look under the hood a lot at. So for that reason, I have really not played around very much with DALL-E 2 or with Midjourney, even though I have experimented with them. I don't like the opacity of either of the engines right now, because I don't feel like I have much in the way of control and understanding what they're doing. And to prove my point, let me share my screen here. I don't know if you can see, but in DALL-E, or I should say in Midjourney, I typed in a prompt that said Native Americans in outer space. And lo and behold, here's what Native Americans are shown as. So, you know, like if you were to type in Europeans in outer space, I doubt you would find something from the colonial period. And so this is the dilemma I have as somebody who's part Native. Here's another prompt, you know, here's another image. Looks like some space-suited person with regalia on. And then the third one, which I found really troubling, were a number of people on a barren landscape. So my only point to this is, when I don't know what the assumptions are being made in terms of how different images are as part of this network of AI, it is something I try looking under the hood as best as I can, even though it's very opaque. And so I try things out, I test things out just to see what are the assumptions being made. And so this is just a cautionary tale for me to everybody else. But what I've been really fascinated with the AI, for me personally, is not necessarily very concrete things, but very esoteric, ethereal kinds of things. And so for me, on a highly personal level, since I was about 7 or 8 years old, I've had periodic dreams throughout my life that I call the dark man dreams. And they're very, very powerful dreams where this foreboding entity or essence challenges me and sometimes scares me to, you know, coming awake. And other times I get in very difficult situations in my dreams. And it's been a learning experience what these dreams have meant for me, but these have happened throughout my life. And so I've spent the last 6 months playing around with the AI to see whether or not I could try to show visibly what some of these things mean to me. So I started off, these were all created with disco diffusion, because for me, I like it right now because it gives me a lot of variables to play with, and I can look under the hood much more transparently, even though there's still a lot of opacity that I'm hoping to get around in the months ahead. So what I wanted to start with was just kind of a big cinematic feel to the dreams that I've had. And so these first images kind of show that off. And the image, the big head in the top right is kind of the dark man element to this whole thing. The dark man concept for me is not an individual that I face off against, but this presence that's the entirety of the dream. It's like I'm captured by this. And then from there, I wanted to create some situational type imagery where the feeling of being continually drawn into the dream space. And so I played around with the imagery to try to get that sense of the foreboding, that sense of there was something ominous around. And again, in the sort of the left center part, the feeling of the dark man is there. And then the next series that I wanted to do was just the atmospheric quality of my dreams. And so that's what I went for in here, trying to learn how I could bring these types of visuals to be. And for me, the qualities of dreams are not concrete. At least my dreams are not concrete. Every time I think I kind of get a handle on something, it changes. And I can't speak for anybody else's dreams, but in these dark man dreams, they're very lucid, but they're very fluid and watery. And when I think I'm onto something, all of a sudden it changes into something else. And that fluidity is not something easily expressed in artwork. And I'm trying to figure out if the AI can help me with this. And then I wanted to express the multi points of view, almost like my own type of surrealist, cubist version of multiple perspectives in one image. So some of these have that. Then I really wanted to do something that felt classic, my version of a classic sort of cubist graphic novel, where this is more cerebral in my looking back at kind of how I felt about it. So I'm not in the dream, but I'm thinking about what the dreams mean to me. So these images are sort of my cognitive essence of those. And then I went much more classic cubist looking in some of these here. And then the last couple images, I wanted to see if I could bridge the gap, if I could create something visually that had kind of the 3D depth, but also a bit of the cubist feel at the same time. These images that I'm showing right now, if I can pull them off and if I can create them, I want these to be very large images, like 40 by 60 inches or larger. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that because these are still fairly small in size to begin with overall. But that's what I've been playing around with here. And then these are the very final ones. So there you go.
Thank you, Michael. One thing that I'm always really impressed by is how much you can cram into a very small canvas. Michael and I have had numerous discussions about the limitations of these engines in terms of the resolution that they can achieve at the moment.
Yeah.
Before we open up to discussion, Verneda was going to go next. I think you're muted.
This is truly fascinating, and I'm glad that I decided to attend this session. I am not exceedingly familiar with AI in the creation of digital fine art, and I sort of stumbled into it today while working with my iPhone, and I came across this app that I didn't even remember that I had downloaded called Night Cafe. And I said, well, let me check out this word prompt to image mechanism here because I have an extensive background as a poet since the 1970s. So I typed in single prompt, my sacred Chinese muse, and came up with this. And I said, well, that's not bad. That's, the Chinese field is consistent. The imagery is something I can identify as being, Chinese. And I am aware that, artificial intelligence in general has a problem in that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. So if you get a software developer who has intrinsic bias, that intrinsic bias is then transmitted into whatever it is that they create. And AI is known to have problems with the faces of women and also, and possibly especially, people of color. Okay, it really fails badly in that regard. And algorithms based on assumptions about color, which are deleterious, have proven to be very dangerous, and feeding, Black people into the carceral system here in the United States, and other problems, even spilling over into healthcare and feeding negative outcomes for cancer therapies and kidney failure, things as basic as that. So it's important that the AI be able to think broadly about all citizens of the planet and not just be locked into this Eurocentric colonialist mindset, So I decided to test out what Night Cafe would do with women's faces and Black people's faces to see if it could create from word prompts in a manner that I find likable. So I then went to this. I'm going to skip over this for right now. And I put in the prompt beautiful queen, and I got this distorted, European but distorted face, okay? And then I went back and I said, well, let me see if I can get a female face that relates to the My Chinese Muse prompt. And I couldn't get it. I wound up with, stuff that was really, kind of messy. Like this, for instance, And so I went back to this, the male figure, and I reworked him. And after I did that, then it gave me a female face. And I'm like, okay, who is this? The Adam and Eve situation, all over again. You create the man first and use him in order to get a decent female face. I don't know, but I intend to explore this further. And so I said, well, let's see what happens with Black people. So I said, I put in the prompt, a beautiful African queen. And I got this. Okay. That's their idea of a beautiful African face. All right. And then I said, well, let me try something that maybe the AI engines can relate to from the news. And I did Black Lives Matter and came up with this, And notable here is the absence of kinky hair. Of course, Black people, we're known for kinky hair, tight coils. And here the hair is straight, and then here we have the European image here. Exactly what it is, I don't know. And the reflections of what could be ambulance, traffic, police, hints of flashing lights and danger, but to basically present this as, to me, is garbage. It looks like garbage, human garbage. And I have a problem with that, very definitely. And I think that for those of us who work in digital media, people who create these programs need to be approached about how they're doing. I mean, I agree with Michael that there's a level of opacity going on here. And this agenda, it is Eurocentric, and denigrating type worldview when you seek to express art about cultures outside of that European framework. The AI not only fails in this limited foray, for me, it not only fails, but it sabotages the desire to create art. And I find that problematic indeed. So I had another image here if I pull it up, but I didn't put it in the folder, but I had one for Black is Beautiful, and I got a very mammy-ish Step and Fetch It type of caricature. So we have our work cut out for us. You know, this is definitely an arena for social justice to apply itself. And that's it. Okay, let me pull this off.
Thank you, Verneda. Echoing some of the concerns that Michael raised earlier. Michael, do you have any response?
Oh, well,
Yeah,
I agree with Michael. So Michael.
Yeah, and I'm glad that Verneda brought that up as well. And I'm not suggesting anything malicious. I mean, I'm not saying that it can't be as well, but I think this notion of bias that we're not thinking about can be very infective across all forms of artwork and in every aspect of our lives. And I know sometimes people hate hearing that, but darn it, you know, we can do better. And we just need to be consciously aware of it as artists, what our own experiences and biases are. We can't negate them, but we can be conscious of that and then hopefully act responsibly.
And I think the awareness is very critical because if we are to function as colleagues, we need to have a level playing field. You know, I mean, artists bring enough trial and tribulation to their craft as it is. I mean, we have many things to overcome individually and culturally. However, why should people of color be further hampered by this extreme limitation? You know, and it comes a point where negligence becomes maliciousness. You know, I can understand it, you know, people not wanting to not assume malice. But when things are so glaringly negligent and inaccurate and plays into a narrative that we all know so well, I mean, I'm not crazy, and I'm not the only one here that sees it, you know. But it's really something. It's a lot to have to cope with. That I have to neutralize this negative energy before I can even start to create on these AI engines. Okay, that is not a level playing field, and I frankly resent having one more arena in which I have to work harder. Okay, I want to be as free as the next artist, you know, and I do believe that it is incumbent upon us all to voice that demand for egalitarian headspace and egalitarian access to the positive aspects of AI intelligence that does not instantly denigrate our words into images that we find historically offensive. So anyway, that's my rant. Hallelujah. So,
It sort of reminds me of lots of discussions that go all the way back to cave painting. And lots of people used to ask, why did all the people then always paint animals? And the answer that the scientists came up with was, well, the rock formations suggested animals to them. Well, maybe, but perhaps it had more to do with the fact that their whole existence depended on the animals. And so they had animals on the brain. Now, if you move that up, I'm not a real tech person, but it makes me wonder if these AI programs that each one of you have used had the ability to look at everything else you have in your computer and what sort of things you look at regularly and brought that into the program.
well, it didn't do it for me, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, and Lee, that's a good point. And for me, that's my cautionary tale of the opacity of the AI engines. What I think is not understood, at least for me right now, is how are images equated to one another? What, in the adversarial network, what are the nodes? Where is the combat happening? Where's the intelligence going on there? Because, I mean, Patrick had made a point before about the Dadaists and the Surrealists. Now, if you look at the imagery that Dadaists used, and if you look at, like a toilet as art, well, because there's a perspective there, there's a point of view there that said that. But if you look at, a toilet that's on Lowe's or Home Depot, is that the same thing as what Duchamp did? No. But is the AI engine looking at all pictures of this thing or that thing, not being able to distinguish it all? Those are the kinds of things that then get to kind of what Verneda was talking about as well, in terms of the European-centric view of what the world is about. Are the images that are going into the, a million images going into an engine, they want to have a wide variety because they've got thousands and thousands and maybe even millions of people creating things. So they want to have enough diversity. But then what's real, what's the substance there? And not knowing that, not having a good understanding, then for me, that's why I say, for me, these AI engines are very interesting, but the faux element to me is the opacity, that not having a good sense of what's really under the hood and how are the decisions being made, and that's what really irritates me right now, is with some of these engines, it's impossible to know.
Well, it's kind of like that bit they call Arthur C. Clarke's thing, Clarke's third law. Any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. And so, so the thing is that this is a deterministic thing, but it's just, so, indeterminate, that, it's too complex for us to get around our heads. And Renata's exactly right, that it does have, a lot of implicit biases in it, from, that go all the way back, to, structuring of code and all that sort of thing, that, it's like down to the point of even saying, I worked with this a little bit, even the matter of, is it using English, as a common vernacular for coding? I mean, that assumes a lot, don't you think?
Yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
Yeah.
I think the engines are reflecting what's out there in the world, and the biases are out there. So the engines for whatever reason, are going to pick up things like stock images of other periods of time. So I think, it's a reflection. It's an actual reflection. It make us understand that the bias, if you didn't see it before, it's there now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
the
think-
big problem is that most people don't see bias though.
No,
That's the sneaky, bastardly, that's our blindness.
Even in the way that, the sort of, our art histories are constructed, our notions of what the history of art is, up until relatively recently, it was a fairly straight, biased, Eurocentric, like this is how art came about, and meanwhile there was, multiple streams of culture being developed on every continent simultaneously in reality, what I mean? But the story usually isn't described that way, or it's broken down into segments that are sort of separate, components.
Well, it makes me wonder if several of us got the same program in our computer and we all typed in flying turtles or whatever that was. Would the image all come up the same for all of us?
within a range, probably.
So,
Well,
And
actually,
interesting test. That would be good. Interesting to test.
no, but that's one of the characteristics of, for example, Mid-Journey. I will go back a month and take the same phrase, and it never gives me the same result.
Yeah,
And I only
there's a random generation part of it.
And most of these engines work off of pre-training. There are a few where you can upload your own imagery, but they're not harvesting from your particular machine. That all of the machine learning has been done on huge data sets of imagery, things like Google Images and probably crawling various art sites and all the museum sites and so forth. So a lot of biases that they're going to be echoing back are in those institutions and in those data sets.
Yeah.
But they're not, they're not built to look at what's on your phone and adapt whatever they're delivering based on that.
Does anyone know if things like Mid-Journey take the specific user's prompt history into effect? Is that taken into the algorithm when an image is generated? That is if I put in the same prompt as Renata right now in real time, are the images going to be similar, or are they based on that each user's prompt history?
I don't know for sure, but I think right now they'd be as similar as if you just put it in twice.
I think that they're never similar ever for anyone, even for you.
Well, I mean, there's affinities between images. Like if you regenerate from the same prompt, those images, particularly on an engine like Wombo Dream, where you're picking sort of a style parameter to begin with, whereas some are much more wide open in terms of what they might deliver. So some of that is, and I don't know if people saw what DALL-E announced today, but now they have a whole thing where you can upload an image, any image, and regenerate new images based on whatever you're seeding with visually.
Yeah, there were a couple apps where I was doing that because the imagery that you get, if you typed in older women any place, it's ridiculous. So I had to work a long time to get something that I didn't feel offended by, because the bias is so strong for women in our culture. So yeah, it's not historic, as everyone is saying, the bias is built in, So I didn't show anything because I began to put in the images of my own face so that I was at least working with something that felt real, like an actual person. It wasn't relying upon these incorrect ideas about what a woman is as she ages. So that was an experience that I had. It's just.
So how does that affect you?
How does what part affect me? That I'm
Encountering the bias in the creative process. How does that affect your work?
It's infuriating. It's infuriating. I mean, it's constant. I mean, there's two parts of it. There's the female part and there's the aging part. And the way that just the language of our culture, the imagery that even if you Google older woman, it's chilling, actually.
Yeah.
So there's a constant sort of rethinking and perception I'm dealing with when I'm creating and using that kind of, and that's part of the whole reason I'm doing the series that I'm doing, is to expand the idea of what a woman is in aging in our culture. And so it's like it's mixed, like I'm angry, but also I'm trying to create something different so that the base of what's available is broader and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah,
Angry mostly.
I think you do a great job of infusing beauty into a space, an artistic space that can be very constricted.
Yeah.
You know? And you do imbue the artwork with a sense of freedom and beauty.
Thank you.
And overcoming and control. And these are not necessarily elements that are attributed to women in a search for qualities that are feminine, you know,
Yeah.
or female oriented. So, yeah.
Thanks, Renata. I appreciate that and appreciate your comment.
It's real.
I like the word constrict is correct, is a very correct.
Oh yeah, you can. I know it's constricted. I mean, I deal with it all the time.
Push out.
Yeah, but you know, that is a basic law of human nature, that when we are presented with resistance, that pushing back against that resistance, even as it increases in its intensity, it generates strength for the person who's pushing against it. So as we encounter these progressive hurdles and difficulties, as we push back against it in our creative thinking and in assigning our philosophical preferences, we in turn, despite our frustrations, become stronger. You know, and the same thing for muscles. If you want to build muscle mass, you have to not only eat protein, but you have to exercise and subject those muscles that you want to enhance to progressive increases in resistance and repetition. And over time, if you keep everything going, you wind up with a stronger set of muscles. You have strength, and the consequence of that strength is felt all throughout the entire body. So hopefully that we all will get that benefit, you know, for all the frustration that we go through dealing with this stuff. Yeah.
Thanks for your perspective.
You're welcome.
This is why I love our salon so much. I mean, it's refreshing to hear everybody's points of view and to see all the work today. I love the artist in all of you, because I don't see that in a lot of the world around me, unfortunately. And it gives me a lot of inspiration. So thanks to everybody.
Michael, I have a question. Is like, do you think that maybe the reason why I don't necessarily do work with this stuff figuratively is because I don't necessarily want to be in a space with, you know, some of those concerns, you know, in other words, maybe not putting my own, you know,
Yeah.
not mapping my own identity, you know, onto those things. And
Yeah.
yeah,
That's interesting, Patrick. That and that's why I'm hopeful. I have a contact friend of mine who's a programmer, and I'm hoping that he's going to be able to help me either create a brand new AI engine or figure out how to tweak some of the existing things out there that we can maybe address some of these issues that everybody's bringing. I don't know, but yeah, I get where you're coming from on that. Totally.
Yeah, because, I mean, I see these things. I mean, I see what usually comes out of these things, you know, what sort of images come out of them. They look like something off of a Dell science fiction paperback 90% of the time, done by
Exactly. Yes.
And that is so loaded. And so the thing is, if I'm doing Techspressionism, you know, I want something that reflects a technological aspect of expressionism. And that's why I was chasing the stuff that I'm doing.
Yes.
You know, so I basically want to get the sausage out for the meat that I put in.
Anyone remember Eliza,
yes,
the sort of AI?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, using Eliza and expecting to get actual therapy out of it. You know, it's an interesting exercise.
But Colin, that's our society right now. I mean, you know, people look just online. Everybody wants instantaneous results for everything, and that's the double-edged sword that we have. We've created technologies that have some really powerful aspects to them, but if we get lazy, then it's science as magic. And I keep thinking of the time machine, and are we going to end up being like the Eloi that have all this great technology, but we completely divorce ourselves from any understanding of it, and you know, that's it.
I think this. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh no, Renata, go ahead.
You talked about the cautionary tale. Whether you had an example of the cautionary tale, Michael, and I think the cautionary tale is for AI, period, that we need, as Verneda pointed out, we need a watchdog. We need to be our own watchdog, whether it's our art or what's happening in our society, given the potential of AI. We have to some way ferret out what works, what doesn't work, where it is reflecting things that are not positive, or with things that drag down our society. So it's got to be watched in so many areas, not just in art, but in medicine, you know, politics, commercials, what have you. It's so easy to turn on the machine and make something happen and use that without giving any thought to where it comes from, why it exists, and who's at the helm.
Well, I mean, there's such a basic assumption with this that I don't think that we're talking about. In other words, it's such a powerful opiate, and I say that very intentionally, to basically type something in and get something we expect.
Yeah.
And that is such a base assumption. In other words, so what happens if you typed in dog and came out cat? You know, I mean, this is basically straight signal, you know, sign signifier relationship, you know, and so that's the structure of the engine. And then we go out from that folds in the biases, that folds in everything. And so right at the moment, I'm looking at radical consideration of the technology in general.
I think, you know, seeing Verneta's images, it made me think how the images themselves are an interesting artistic commentary on the bias that is, you know, it would be a good idea for a show, you know, for people to put together images that illustrate bias, that are AI generated images. I mean, really, like, to me, the best way to show somebody something is just to show them a picture of it, right? You know, you show them, hey, here's what happens when you type in this, and people are like, huh, and it's like, it doesn't require any further verbal or written explanation. People just look at it and say, you know what, that's whack.
Well, I mean,
Whack
I
is
agree,
right.
Colin, and I think for me, one of the classic examples is historically, going back when you got crayons, the flesh colored was, white person color.
Right.
And that was called flesh. There you go. I mean, that's, but we didn't think about that as being anything bad. It wasn't necessarily something that if you weren't, if you were a person of color, then you're saying, what are you talking about? So, but it's that kind of subterfuge as human beings that if we don't, and that's why I think us as artists, going to Cynthia's point, I don't know about watchdogs, but the integrity that each one of us has to maintain as an artist has to be at the core of what we create. And I think that's the bottom line for me as a human being and as an artist.
So I have a question. Is there any software where you could draw from your own images, where you could put your own keywords into those images? Because that's what I'd like to say. I could take 100 images, put my own keywords into those images, and then see what happens.
I don't know
have
of one
seen
right
some-
now, Cynthia, but I'm working on it.
Okay.
I was going to say, there are some tools out there that you can partially train yourselves.
Yeah.
To work with libraries that they have like a base amount of machine learning training already done, because the reality of a person doing themselves and the server time required to train at the level of like a Dolly, it's just enormous amounts of computer cycles to get something that, so it's like a starter kit that's partially baked with all these biased images that all the other ones are using, but then you can add some of your own. And that's the only things I've seen so far are tools like that. I'd be real curious to see what you build, Michael, because I think basically, much as I enjoy playing with these things, I don't think any of these were built for artists. They were built for engineers. They were built for marketers. We just happen to share that turf and we want to use it and use it well, but I don't think they were built for us.
Patrick, what did you use when you fed in all of your calligraphic images?
That was Playform, and that was a pretty straight up GAN, and I fed in different ones and played with the biases and things like that. So I mean, it was pretty much, I think Ahmed pretty much uses kind of a variation on PyTorch. So I mean, it's I pretty much was playing with that specific model to try to look at the comparative nature, of a GAN and that sort of thing, to try to, sort out what the commonality between all these things was, to get like what I called a personal taxonomy, to try to get what was common between them. And that was really specific to the form, so, I wasn't really trying to get it to do something that was, emergent or generative.
My approach has been to use the exact same set of words for 2 months, but keep riffing on them and refining them. And so I'm doing only one subject, and I'm just altering some of the parameters, because that way first of all, I want to feel like I'm collaborating with it. And second of all, I feel like I'm not interested in depicting people because it deforms people, whereas objects, you have a better chance.
Too much like Francis Bacon all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Bacon, but
It's retro sci-fi.
you get a little tired of Bacon.
There is, to speak to a comment earlier about the watchdog component of this new arena of knowledge we're developing called artificial intelligence. There's an organization called the Future of Life, and their website is futureoflife.org. And they work with the government and with leaders of industry to try and make them accountable in this arena of artificial intelligence, to make sure that there's an egalitarian stance to it in healthcare and in scientific adventures in general, and probably also the arts. But they're based in Boston, and they could probably use input from members of our group, you know?
Thank you, Verneda. I just want to say, when I chose this topic, I had a distinct feeling that we could have hours and hours of discussion. The whole subject is changing daily. There's more and more stuff being added. Diane told me before the meeting that now you can have animation AI engines. That's a new one.
Night
So-
Cafe. Night Cafe did it for a long time.
But those were, I thought they were, people were throwing their still images into like a post-production thing like After Effects. This is actually going to generate animated work.
No, I mean, my stuff generated from, from the images I brought it, but it brought out very different things from what I put in it.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank all the artists who participated. I really enjoyed seeing all the different images.
Yeah, it's amazing. Michael, I want to comment that you really captured that dark man, horror,
Thanks.
surrealism, futuristic, subconscious, dread, searching for control, all that,
Thanks, Renata. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I just pasted into the chat, if anyone's interested, a big list. I didn't gather it, someone else gathered it, of tools and resources for AR art. And it covers a lot of different tools that are out there. So if you want to go exploring it, it's a good starting point.
Thank you.
Michael, did you perhaps think that maybe the dark man is dark matter?
No. That's an interesting element, but no. Oh, but Cynthia, I saw your post on the book Physics and Art.
Oh, that's a wonderful book.
I picked it up. I'm enjoying it so far.
I love it. Art and physics, just incredible.
Yeah.
The fact that artists have prefigured things that have happened in science, just fascinating. So you can get it at a library, or you can buy it really inexpensively online at a secondhand online shop. But I ended up buying it because I got it from the library and it took me too long to read it. They wanted it back because I savor each chapter. So yeah, pick it up.
What's it called again?
Art and Physics.
Yeah.
By Leonard Schlein. I'll put it in the chat.
It's an older book. It's been around for a while.
Yeah, 91, 19. So it's a bit it's a little dated in the, the latest physics, but, it covers a history from way back. So there's still a lot of validity to it.
When I read it in 91, I was kind of like, the whole family read it.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
That's cool. I didn't even know it existed. So it was just happenstance that I saw Cynthia's post. So thank you.
See if I can put that.
Colin, you're muted.
Oh, thank you, Renata. So yeah, I just was saying we're just about at time to stop the recording. So I think I'm going to count us down. I just wanted to thank Renata for proposing this topic and moderating and organizing. And, after we stop the recording, anyone who would like to hang out for a little bit is more than welcome. Usually sort of after we end the session, we've been coming up with a new topic for the next salon. So I'd like to continue that tradition if possible. But until next time, happy happy art making. And we will stop the recording of this salon, number 51 in 3, 2, 1, and cut.